The Air Force is hitting strategic targets. Amongst the dead, an American woman freelance photographer. Her close friend and colleague could do nothing. This is the carnage of daytime bombing, which despite the advanced technology of a former superpower proved inaccurate. Military strategists say it's a tactic of an invading force intent on demoralizing the Chechen people. But as Grozny tried to absorb this, the biggest bombardment since President Yeltsin ordered his troops in, General Dadayev was still claiming that his people had two choices, either death or freedom. This woman says she can't leave, she has nowhere to go.
Please don't leave us in this situation, because it's very terrible.
Looking at Grozny's hospitals, which are filled to overflowing, mostly with civilians, it comes as no surprise that senior Russian officers are refusing to advance on this tiny republic. But the might of Russia's Air Force, with its awesome firepower, fell down on Grozny's people today. Yet so many are prepared to carry on suffering. The warplanes may be above them, these people have little, but they refuse to surrender. Tonight, this city is under bombardment again. Whatever is said in the Kremlin, the people of the Chechen capital think nothing will stop Russia from continuing its onslaught. Andrew Simmons, News at 10, Grozny.
In the face of all such evidence, Russians are being told tonight that the Chechens faked the air raids by blowing up their own buildings. Earlier, there was a Russian report that Defense Minister Pavel Grachov had sacked 3 generals, accepted the resignation of another, and taken personal command of the operation against Chechnya himself. It was officially denied. So, what's going on in Moscow? ITN's Glenn O'Glazer reports from there.
Russian television has been reporting the government's line. There was no bombing of Grozny. The Chechens faked the air raids themselves. A thoroughly unconvincing denial of the carnage witnessed by Western correspondents. There's muddle and confusion in Moscow. Defense Minister Pavel Grachov was reported to have sacked 6 of his top commanders, including the deputy commander-in-chief of the Russian army and the most senior officer to protest against the Chechnya operation. The sackings were later denied, but revealed the disarray in the army high command. Defense Minister Grachov had boasted how easily he could crush resistance in Chechnya.
A single regiment of paratroopers could sort out the whole conflict in just 2 hours.
But while Russia has the military muscle, there's little military will to finish the job. First signs of dissent in the army came last week, when General Ivan Babichev disobeyed an order to advance on these Chechen civilians. Now the entire campaign is floundering.
It's necessary to keep the army under control. And I think that it is a very serious signal of alarm, both for the president and for the parliament.
But President Yeltsin has hardly been seen throughout this crisis.
Nobody knows who's taking the decisions. Nobody knows whether Yeltsin's taking the decisions. And yet, at the end of the day, he's the person that has to carry the can. And that can may prove to be a very big burden indeed, a major political handicap.
The Russian parliament has called an emergency session of both lower and upper houses for Saturday. President Yeltsin responded, promising in a letter to go on television with a plan for a political solution. Boris Yeltsin's political fate is now indivisibly linked to the success or failure of his Chechnya policy. So serious is the threat to the Russian president that he must act decisively and as soon as tomorrow if he is to survive. Glenn O'Glazer, News at 10, Moscow.
Here, the 4 men sentenced over the Guinness takeover of distillers could be in line for massive compensation for wrongful conviction. The Home Office said their cases are being referred back to the Court of Appeal because new evidence has been found. Here's ITN's Joan Thurkettle.
Former Guinness chief Ernest Saunders, head of the Heron Group, Gerald Ronson, and stockbroker Tony Pons all served prison terms for their part in the Guinness affair. Financier Jack Lyons, on the left here, lost his knighthood and was fined £3 million. The case centred on allegations that the company artificially maintained its share price during the £2.75 million takeover battle with Argyle, the supermarket group. The new evidence rests on a tribunal report which the Serious Fraud Office are alleged to have withheld from the defence at the time of the trial. That report appears to suggest that non-disclosure of share dealing does not breach the Takeover Code and was in fact common city practice. If the appeal court say the Fraud Office has acted illegally, the repercussions will be enormous.
The ultimate outcome, I think, will be that the defendants, their convictions will be quashed, their fines will be repaid, the amount that they paid in costs will be reimbursed to them, and they will be awarded substantial compensation.
The characters in this affair were rich and flamboyant. The whole saga became a kind of soap opera. Ernest Saunders' 5-year jail term was halved after doctors said he was suffering from pre-senile dementia. He now appears to have recovered. Whilst in Ford Open Prison, Gerald Ronson, one of Britain's richest men, was let out for motorbike rides. So it's now up to the appeal court judges to decide whether the non-disclosure of this document is enough to overturn the convictions. If they say it is, it will be another substantial blow for the Serious Fraud Office and lead to more criticism of the way they handle these cases. Joan Thurkettle, News at 10, Central London.
The Spanish fleet is coming. In a year's time, it'll be allowed into some of the British and Irish waters so far close to it. Our Fisheries Minister William Waldegrave abstained today in the showdown vote in Brussels. British fishermen are far from happy, but the Spaniards didn't get everything they wanted either. Our political correspondent Hugh Pym reports.
Bleary-eyed after 31 hours of talks this week, and tonight left with little alternative but to back down. William Waldegrave, outnumbered at the negotiating table, has agreed to allow the Spanish fleet into some of Britain's best fishing grounds.
We have a result which was not as good as I would have liked, but which was much better than it looked as if it was going to be at the beginning of the week.
So the Cornish fishing fleet will find the Spanish trawlers operating close to home. Under the European Common Fisheries Policy, Spain has always been due to gain access to British and Irish waters in 2 years' time. This week's row has been over which areas. Currently, Spanish fishing vessels aren't allowed into an area known as the Irish Box, but that restriction is to be lifted in 1996. Britain wanted to keep a zone from the Irish Sea down to Cornwall. But today Mr Waldegrave agreed to give up part of that to the Celtic Sea. That concession, fishermen believe, will prove disastrous.
We'd be putting it mildly if we said we were devastated. What we're now going to see is something in the region of 40 Spanish fishing vessels targeting our prime fishing area.
And after the confrontations between Cornish and Spanish boats in the Bay of Biscay this summer, there's already talk of violent clashes when the new agreement takes effect. And Mr Waldegrave faces a rough ride when he tries to sell the deal to his own party. Eurosceptics already claiming it's a sellout to Brussels, and at least 3 Tory backbenchers from the southwest saying they'll consider their position if it comes to a vote in the Commons. Hugh Pym, News at 10, Westminster.
9 IRA terrorists will, after all, leave Irish jails early for Christmas. The Irish government gave its final approval tonight. 30 other IRA members will be let out for a 7-day